Well, hello, Nativity Bible Heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Bible Study Wednesday. We are in 2 Kings chapter 10 today, and we started last week with the incident called the the revolution of Jehu, Jehu. This was a cleaning house of the northern kingdom. Jehu was considered to be the prophetic word fulfillment of what was supposed to happen. In chapter 9, we had the beginning of that, concluded by the literal tossing Jezebel out the window so that the dogs ate her body. Yes, indeed, we knew that there would be an ignominious end to Jezebel, would we not? Now, in chapter 10, Jehu's revolution continues in chapter 10, verse 1, 2 Kings 10:1. Now, Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Now, remember who Ahab was. Ahab was the king that was the king of the northern kingdom Israel during Elijah the prophet, not Elisha. And he was the one he married Jezebel. Jezebel is the one who brought in the Baal worship. Ahab had a long reign, and it was like over 20 years, 24 years or so. It might have even been 40. I think it was just like in the mid-20s though. Long time. And he actually, according to archaeological evidence, he actually did a lot of good. I mean, Ahab was actually a very good king. But due to the fact that he was not somebody that cleaned house of the syncretism of the worship of the Yahwistic cult, which is the faith of Israel, and the existing Baal worship of the Canaanites. He was always judged harshly. He never got rid of that, and he seems to have encouraged it even with the marrying of Jezebel. So anyway, in Jehu's revolution, guess what? We gotta make sure that no descendants of Ahab are there to claim the throne, because as long as there could be a rival claimant. And you can't have a revolution if you don't wipe everybody out. This is the way that works. Gotta remember, the way Jehu is approaching this revolution is as someone who is under harem, okay? It's like he's just cleaning house, because creating a clean slate. This is a part of the way Yahwism was back then, that it believed that there could be that Yahwism could not take root unless it had a clean slate to work with. It couldn't work with blending in anything. And so this activity helped to foster this kind of an idea, shall we say. So now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Samaria was the capital. Remember, the capital of the northern kingdom. Ahab actually built this city and made Samaria, and it was a good, very strategically located city as well. The thing where he says 70 sons, 70 is just a round number. It's just a round number in Hebrew. It's kind of like 100 for us. It just means a lot. We're not sure how many, but it doesn't mean 70. It never does. It never did. It never will in the book of, in any of the book, all the Bible. The word 70, it just means a whole lot. A whole lot. Yes, that is true, which is one of the reasons why we have the numbers that we do in the book of Revelation that people think are so fascinating, and they're all symbolic. Okay, anyway. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of Jezreel. Now, we're a little unsure about what those letters are about, or why he would do that if he's already there. I don't know. to the elders and to the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, since your master's sons are with you, and you have at your disposal chariots and horses and a fortified city and weapons, select the son of your master who is the best qualified. Set him on his father's throne and fight for your master's house. It's kind of a throwdown kind of a thing to say, right? Okay, pick your best man, put him on the throne, and let's see how it goes. But they were utterly terrified, verse 4, and said, look, 2 kings could not withstand him. How then can we stand? Referring to the kings. He's already killed off, he's already killed, oh, I can't remember now. In chapter 9, he already killed off a couple other kings. Now he's going after the sons of the kings, of the former kings. How can we, verse 5. So the steward of the palace and the governor of the city, along with the elders and the guardians, sent word to Jehu, we are your servants. We will do anything you say. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think right. Oh, okay. It's kind of a letter of capitulation. Yes. Then he wrote them a second letter saying, if you are on my side and if you are ready to obey me, here's the test, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me at Jezreel tomorrow at this time. Now, it's unclear as to whether or not he's saying, okay, chop off their heads and bring them to me. Or is he just saying, bring me your leaders? And who knows? His intention was always to get rid of them anyway. Well, here we go. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the leaders of the city who were charged with their upbringing. Okay, so these are the like the stewards of the royal family kind of thing, right? When the letter with their upbringing, who were charged with their upbringing, when the letter reached them, they took, verse 7, when the letter reached them, they took the king's sons and killed them. 70 persons. They put their heads in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel. Yes, this was an activity that they actually did back then. They would actually chop off people's heads and collect them and send them off as proof. When the messenger came and told him, they have brought the heads of the king's sons. This is a message coming to Jehu. He said, lay them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until the morning. This was an activity that a usurper would do in Assyrian practice. Yes, I know this is in Israel, but it was an Assyrian practice that you would chop off the heads of your enemies and lay them as a pyre, or not a pyre, but in a pile of as a symbol of saying, "Don't let this happen to you." Yes, it was intended to put fear into people's brains. Right, verse 9. Then in the morning, when he went out, he stood and said to all the people, "You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these?" That's an interesting turn of a phrase, because it's always acting like, but I didn't kill these people. I didn't even ask that these people be dead. So we're not 100% sure if that's what he had intended for them to do that, or if he was intending on killing them himself. But I guarantee you, he was pleased to see that they were dead. Know then that verse 10, know then that there shall fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spoke concerning the house of Ahab. What he's saying here is the words that the prophet Elijah had spoken. See, what this is all about is about fulfilling the words of the prophets. Okay, remember these stories are called, in a section of the Hebrew Bible, called the former prophets. Okay, the former prophets are the prophets that didn't have their own books. Elijah and Elisha There was also a Micaiah also that was very active during the early part of Ahab's reign. But the words of the prophets must be fulfilled because the prophets brought the word of the Lord. And so this is the way Jehu is speaking. Jehu is basically saying, hey, all I'm doing is fulfilling what God said was supposed to happen anyway. Okay, for the Lord had done what he said through his servant Elijah, So that's the end of verse 10. Know then that there shall fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord. Fall to the earth. The idea is that the word of the Lord is fulfilled. It doesn't fall to the earth. It actually wafts and fulfills and returns fulfilled to God. That's the idea of the word of the Lord. There's nothing, know then that there shall fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spoke concerning the house of Ahab. For the Lord has done what he said through his servant Elijah. So Jehu seems to be quoting a lot of, hey, this is what was supposed to happen. I'm only doing the Lord's work. This is his attitude. So, verse 11, Jehu killed all who were left of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his leaders, close friends, and priests, until he left him no survivor. This describes the activity of Harem. Harem, which means devoted to the Lord, meaning clean start, meaning nothing, no residue, no gain from it other than just cleaning house. Verse 12. Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way, when he was at Beth-Eked of the shepherds, Jehu met relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah, and said, "Who are you?" They said, "We are kin of Ahaziah. We have come down to visit the royal princes and the sons of the queen mother," which means, yes, they were relatives of Ahab's wife. There had been intermarriage between the kings of the north and the kings of the south in this, and this is what they're referring to. The sons of the queen mother is like basically their aunt, okay? She was dead already, remember? He said, "Take them alive." And they took them alive and slaughtered them at the pit of Beth-Eked, 42 in all. He spared none of them. 42 is another one of those numbers that is not meant to be literal. It's like a lot. No, it's not 70, which is also a formulaic number. So this is another act of violence in Jehu's revolution. He's cleaning house. He is getting rid of the whole lot that had taken religion and started to syncretize Yahwism with Baalism. Verse 15, when he left there, this is Jehu continuing his bloody revolution. When he left there, he met Jehonadab, son of Rechab, coming to meet him. Now, okay. I got to explain to you who this guy is. Jehonadab, son of Rechab, there came a time when they were called the Rechabites, okay? These were a particular faction of society that was so conservative that they idealized the time of the wilderness. They were the ones who held to the fact that, well, this agricultural society that we have in the land that belonged to the Canaanites, that's where the bad stuff started. We were just fine out in the wilderness. We had the law, we had the tabernacle, we lived in tents, everybody was happy. We didn't have to worry about syncretism. We didn't have to worry about these gods of the Canaanites. We didn't have to worry about agriculture. God gave us what we needed, the food that we needed, It was only when we took the land and started intermingling with these Canaanites and started seeing their ways of worship and started incorporating their Baal worship into ours. That's when things went wrong. So there was this idealization of the wilderness tradition, that those were the good old days. That's what we need to do to make Israel great again. We need to live in tents and rely on God alone and not go turn to these false gods of the agricultural society. They almost felt like the agricultural society was bad because of the fact that it is what tempted people to go toward the Baal gods, because that's what the Baal gods were all about. We're about the weather. We're about the crops. We're about, are we getting the rain we need? Are we getting the sun we need? Are we getting everything we need in order to grow our food? This Jehonadab represents the tradition that said, that's where we went wrong. Oh, that we lived in the wilderness and dwelt in tents. This is the way they chose to live. Kind of sounds a little bit like a lot of the monks sometimes, if you think about it. Well, anyway, this thing where Jehu is meeting Jehonadab, son of Rechab. Son of Rechab is supposed to remind us of, oh yeah, the Rechabites. We know the Rechabites. Those are those super fundamentalist conservative people who want to live in tents like the wilderness days. So the reader would know this. Well, they're going to join forces. When he left there, he met Jehonadab, son of Rechab, coming to meet him. He greeted him and said to him, is your heart as true to mine as mine is to yours? This is basically a formulaic way of saying, are you with me? I'm with you. I think we're really on the same wavelength here. Jehonadab answered, it is. Jehu said, if it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand. Jehu took him up with him into the chariot. So this is a symbol of the teaming up of this wilderness tradition of the Rechabites with this cleaning house tradition of Jehu against the Canaanite religion of the Baal worship. Verse 16, he said, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride in his chariot. When he came to Samaria, he killed all who were left to Ahab in Samaria, until he had wiped them out, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke to Elijah. So again, there's more killing of Ahab's descendants. There's more fulfillment of the word. Remember, all of this is about fulfilling the word of the Lord. The idea that the words that were spoken through the prophets must be fulfilled. Verse 18, then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab offered Baal small service, but Jehu will offer much more. Now, therefore, summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. We don't normally get our Deuteronomistic historian giving us the motivation. We oftentimes have to discern it ourselves, but here he makes it clear. Look at this. But Jehu was acting with cunning in order to destroy the worshipers of Baal. We're so thankful that the narrator chose to let us know this. Look at this. Jehu decreed, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. Remember, Baal worship had been the problem. So the Rechabites were somewhat correct in that it's like, yeah, the agricultural society that required, that made it easier to worship Baal really was a part of our problem. It was a very materialistic religion that it saw, like I said, the weather, the rain, the sun, the thunder, wind, everything materialistic about that was part of the problem. Verse 21, Jehu sent word throughout all Israel. All the worshipers of Baal came, so that there was none left who did not come. Pretty, hyperbolized. This is hyperbole, I think. Who knows? Maybe they did get everybody. I don't know. Let's see. They entered the temple of Baal. It's a trap. Somebody, no. Until the temple of Baal was filled from wall to wall. He said to the keeper of the wardrobe, bring out the vestments for all the worshipers of Baal. So he brought out the vestments for them. Then Jehu entered the temple of Baal with Jehonadab, son of Rechab, the Rechabites. He said to the worshipers of Baal, search and see that there is no worshiper of the Lord here among you, but only worshipers of Baal. Because he's like, oh, got to make sure that got no Yahwehs. We don't want any Yahwehs here because you're all going to die, and we don't want to kill any Yahwehs. Then they proceeded to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside, saying, whoever allows any of those to escape whom I deliver into your hands shall forfeit his life. So it's like, okay, don't you dare let anybody who gets out running and screaming, guess what? Kill them, make sure they die. This is supposed to make sure that everybody gets killed. I deliver, whoever allows any of those to escape whom I deliver into your hands shall forfeit his life. As soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and to the officers, come in and kill them. Let no one escape. So they put them to the sword. The guards and the officers threw them out, and then went into the citadel of the temple of Baal. They brought out the pillar, that's the Asherah pole, the consort of Baal, that was in the temple of Baal, and burned it. Then they demolished the pillar of Baal and destroyed the temple of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. This is our narrator's way of saying, we turned it into a toilet, and that's what it still is. That's a bit of humor. Verse 28, then Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. So, yeah, this was considered a big problem, Baal worship. And the Deuteronomic historian is cheering on Jehu and is happy to tell us of his activities in this realm. But look in verse 29, but Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit, the golden calves that were in Bethel and in Dan. What is that about? Oh, all the way back, the very first king of the northern kingdom after Solomon died and it split, and Rehoboam took the southern kingdom and Jeroboam took the northern kingdom. Remember, Jeroboam had been Solomon's head of forced labor, and he became the first king of Israel, of the northern kingdom. He put up 2 golden calves, one at the northern end of the kingdom in Dan, one at the southern end of the kingdom in Bethel. And these calves, or bulls, were judged harshly by the Deuteronomistic historian. It's very possible that, Jeroboam gets a really bad rap by our Deuteronomistic historian, but Jeroboam might not have been his intent. It wasn't uncommon for the bull to be used as not a symbol for a god, but to be seen as that thing on which the invisible God, Yahweh, were standing or writing. Anyway, in the eyes of our Deuteronomistic historian, the fact that Jehu did not get rid of those things, see, that might actually be more proof that they weren't associated with Baal worship. But the fact that Jehu let them abide meant that he gets a negative evaluation. Our narrator is so happy that Jehu did what he did, but he didn't go far enough, is what he's saying. Okay? Verse 30. The Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what I consider right, and in accordance with all that was in my heart, have dealt with the house of Ahab, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. So they get 5 kings in that line. But Jehu was not careful to follow the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he caused Israel to commit, which means that he left those golden calves up, and that was a deal breaker. Now, verse 32, okay, shall we continue? In those days, the Lord began to trim off parts of Israel. Yeah, so what that means is, historically, it means that Israel was starting to be weaker. The kingdom to the north, the Syrian kingdom of the north, was starting to get stronger, sometimes called Aram in our scripture here. And so when it says that the Lord began to trim off parts of Israel, it meant it started to shrink because the Assyrians were getting stronger. The Syrians, not the Assyrians, the Arameans from the north were getting stronger. Hazael, we've heard about him before already. He's very brutal in his own way. In fact, Elisha had told him he would be the next king, and he ends up doing his own coup in Aramea or Syria. And so he starts annexing land of Israel. Verse 33, from the Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the Wadi Arnon, that is Gilead and Bashan. So all that Transjordanian side, they start to lose all of that to this king of the north. This was a part of Jehu's failure toward the end of his career. Because of the weakness, he had to give up property, shall we say, as a way of looking at it. And so in the big picture, Jehu wasn't a great king. He just happened to come to power by way of the kind of revolution that made him very popular with our Deuteronomistic historian. But in the big picture, Israel didn't prosper, and it got eaten away by the kingdom to its north. Verse 34, now the rest of the acts of Jehu, all that he did, and all his power, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? It's like, if you want to read the rest of the stuff he did, and from history we know that he did some good stuff and some bad stuff, it's like, yeah, you can read all that. It just, these little things like this, where our narrator says these things, it should clue us into the fact that, oh, that's right, we're not getting straight history here. What we're getting here is a theology of history, okay? We're getting a theology of what happened. We're getting a theological interpretation of what happened, not a history of what happened. So Jehu slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in Samaria. His son Jehoahaz succeeded him. The time that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. So ends chapter 10 of 2 Kings. So this really does beg the question, when we look at the revolution of Jehu, what is the relationship of violence to shalom? Why is it that it seems though that the Lord is so willing to use violence in bringing about shalom? Is it possible that you can even have peace out of violence, right? Well, this Deuteronomistic historian says yes. And what we see here is how the difference is in the New Testament. Because if you think about it, what God does in Jesus is use violence to bring about peace. Now, the difference with Jesus is that it stands as, okay, previously, God was using violence to bring about peace, violence to bring about peace, violence to bring about peace. Now, he uses the violence that people do against God as a way of God to bring peace to the people. It's a flipping over of that entire paradigm, okay? This is one of the things that's so impactful about the cross event. In the cross event, we have violence bringing about salvation. It's violence not of the Lord, but it's violence of the people on the Lord's anointed. And the Lord ending up giving us peace through it. It's kind of like a turning of all of that on its head. And it represents the progression of history in the direction of understanding that how God works. That it's changed, okay? There's been a change in the way that goes on. And there is supposed to be in Jesus the realization by us that, oh, this was God's way of putting an end to violence. So when we enact violence against God and God is able to use that for good, guess what? That means game over. We're done with this business, okay? That part of our history is past. We're not going back there. There always comes a time when we have to get in line with history. Are we on the side of history? God is on the side of history because our God is the Lord of history. So are we on the side of history? Meaning, are we following what the Lord, there's change that the Lord puts into our history. Are we willing to embrace that change and say, okay, yeah, we used to do it that way. God's action now puts an end to that. And guess what? We know something different now. This is just a part of the simple growth of a journey of faith. And I believe that that's where all of this goes eventually. But we have the economy of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Bible, and the way that God used violence then. We've always got to remember, and you've got to telescope it out to the New Testament and find out, so how does God use violence then? Oh, so it gives us a complete and more complete picture of how, well, the way we used to do it, you know what? Not so good. We're done with that. This is how the Lord works in his people. And we are supposed to pay attention to that. We are supposed to abide by that. And we're supposed to let it impact our lives and the way we think and the way we convey our attitudes. And it should also mold our ideologies and our ideas and the way we treat one another. Yes, that's what I believe all of this flows toward. And that's it for Bible Study Wednesday. Lord have mercy. I will see you next time when we see you. Until then, shalom.